Hello, this is Sudarshana Starshine Star. Welcome to my channel. If you like this content, please remember to smash that like button and to subscribe. Thank you so much. Today I'm giving you part 2 of my series of What Americans Really Need to Know, and I will be reading a few pages from the wonderful book Meet Your Straw Man and Whatever You Want to Know. It is available on Amazon, and I will be showing the cover at the end of this clip so you can purchase it for yourself. It's published by the www.nationallibertyalliance.org. So I'm going to begin with the 3 opening prayers to bless and this clip. And here we go. Om, Om, Om. Guru Brahma, Guru Vishnu, Guru Devo Maheshwara, Guru Sakshat Parabrahmam Tasmai Sri Guruvena Namaha. Om Suklam Varadaram Vishnum Sashivanam Chatubhujam Prasanavaranam Dhyai Sarva Vigno Prashantaye. Om Bhur Suvaha Tatsavitur Varenyam Bhargo Devasya Dhimahi Dhiyo Yo Naha Prachodayat. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Part 2. Dealing with debt. Because of the very high percentage of the money earned being taken away from the average person, it is not unusual for people to end up with what looks like quote-unquote debt. Most people spend their time worrying over the statement of what they are told they owe and do endless calculations to see if they agree with the numbers which they have been sent. Again, this is the sort of misdirection which magicians use to fool audiences, distracting their attention away from where the action is really taking place. Here the question is really not how much is owed, but instead is anything actually owed? You need to remember that any financial institution is a legal fiction and does not actually exist. As a result of this, it can only deal with other legal fictions, essentially other pieces of paper, and it can't have any dealings with a man or a woman as they are not legal fictions. It is also important to understand what passes for money nowadays. Let's say our trusty friend James Martin goes looking for a loan and he fills out an application form with the Swindle Bank Inc. for $10,000. Interestingly, the form which he is asked to sign says that he has already received the $10,000, although the loan has not yet been approved. The next day, the loan is approved, and James is handed a check which he is asked to sign and deposit to his account with the bank. We won't follow up on that very interesting procedure at this time, but please remember that he has now provided 2 signatures for $10,000 in the straw man name, and all he has received is an quote-unquote and all he has received is a quote-unquote 1 and 4 zeros in the accounts of the Swindle Bank. All goes well for several months until James loses his job and does not manage to get another one. This is financial trouble, which he does not know how to deal with. Time goes by, and James has not had sufficient money to make payments against his loan from the Swindle Bank Inc. He starts getting letters from the bank saying he must pay the arrears immediately and keep up with the payments in future. There is not the slightest chance of that happening, as James just does not have the money and he does not know what to do. Fortunately, Peter, the next door neighbor of James, happens to be an independent financial advisor with years of experience, and James has the idea of asking him for help. Peter is willing to help, and so he sits down and goes through all of the paperwork. Then he tells James, "You must not ignore this situation. Write back immediately and say that you agree to pay any financial obligation which you might lawfully owe on the condition that they provide: 1. Validation of the debt, that is, the actual accounting. 2. Verification of their claim against you, that is, a signed invoice. 3. A copy of the contract binding both parties, you and them, in a letter by certified mail, so that there is an independent witness to have it being delivered. Every letter you write should be marked clearly, without prejudice, which means that you reserve all your lawful rights and you accept no contract unless it is shown to be lawful by meeting the 4 essential conditions to a lawful binding contract, namely, number 1, full disclosure. You were not told that you were actually creating the credit with your wet ink signature. 2, equal consideration. They brought nothing of value to the table and so had nothing to lose. 3, lawful terms and conditions. Yours were based on fraud. 4, the wet ink signatures of both parties. Corporations can't sign because they have no right or mind to contract, since they are soulless legal fictions, and furthermore, no third party can sign a contract on their behalf. Peter then tells James that agreeing to pay, provided that evidence of a lawful debt can be produced, stops him from being taken to court, because courts only adjudicate between parties who are in dispute, and as James has agreed to pay, there is no dispute. So the court would not accept any application for a hearing. If the swindle bank were foolish enough to try, James has only to send the court a copy of his letter agreeing to pay, and the case would be thrown out, dismissed, immediately, and the bank might well be penalized for wasting the court's time. The bank is now in trouble as it has been running a con game on James, and so cannot produce the documents for which James has asked. The request by James was reasonable in every respect. However, a loan agreement is a contract, and so there has to be full disclosure of all the details, which there wasn't. Both sides have to put up something of equal worth, which didn't happen, and the contract has to be signed in wet ink by both parties, which the bank cannot do. So the bank has a real problem. The bank will probably send a statement of what it wants James to believe is the outstanding amount. James should return this with a polite note saying that a quote-unquote statement is not a quote-unquote invoice. So would they please provide a signed invoice as requested? They will also probably send a photocopy of his loan application form, at which point James should write back and point out politely that it does not constitute a contract, as it was only signed by one of the parties, excuse me while I turn this page, himself. Excuse me, my camera's really going all over the place, please excuse me. And he has asked for a copy of the contract signed by both parties. The bank is likely to go silent at this point and stop corresponding with James. James should then write again, requesting that the necessary documents be sent to him within the next 14 or perhaps 28 days, and if that does not happen, then he will consider the debt to be fully discharged. The bank will either remain silent or write back to say that the debt is fully discharged. If the bank tries phoning, then just tell them politely that you only wish to deal with this matter in writing and hang up. If the bank remains silent for the stated period of time, then James should write back stating that due to the bank's failure to provide the necessary evidence of a lawful debt within the reasonable period of time provided, that James now considers that the debt is fully discharged and asks the bank to confirm that in writing. The bank will normally write back confirming that the debt is fully discharged and that there is nothing owing, and if it does not do that, it will just stop asking for any further payments. The reasons for how and why this takes place takes a good deal of explaining, and many people find it difficult to understand. So it is covered in detail on the following pages here. Many people think that this process sounds like you ripping off the bank, but it is definitely not the case. What is money? Originally in England, the unit of money was called £1 sterling. That was because it was literally sterling silver weighing £1. As it was quite difficult to carry several pounds weight of currency around with you, it was arranged that the actual silver could be held in a bank, and a promissory note, which was essentially a receipt for the deposit of each pound of silver on deposit, was issued. It was much easier to carry these banknotes around and to do business with them. If you wanted to, you could always take these notes to a bank and ask for them to be cashed, and the bank would hand you the equivalent weight of sterling silver in exchange for the notes. Today, the currency in America is quote-unquote banknotes, which are certainly easier to carry around than metal coins, but there is one very important difference. These notes are issued by the private company called the Federal Reserve Bank, which is as good as a name for a company as any other name. However, if you were to take one of their banknotes to a branch of that company and ask for it to be cashed, all that they would do is give you another note with the same numbers of credit printed on it, or alternatively, other notes with smaller numbers printed on them. This is because, unlike the original banknotes, there is nothing of any physical value backing up banknotes of today. They are only materially worth the physical paper on which they are printed. It actually gets worse than that. What happens most commonly nowadays is that they do not even bother printing those pieces of paper. Now they just tap some numbers into a computer record, or if they are old-fashioned enough, they write the numbers into a ledger by hand. What do those numbers represent? Nothing at all. They have no actual value. In other words, just as much value as if you typed them into your own computer, quite meaningless. And yet a bank or other financial institution will merrily, quote-unquote, lend you those numbers in return for years of your work, plus interest charges. Now, isn't that really generous of them? Actually, this is not at all funny, because if you don't keep paying them money earned by your very real work, they will attempt to take your house and possessions away from you. This won't happen if you understand that what they lent you was actually valueless. Take the case of Jerome Daley of Minnesota in America. In court, Jerome challenged the right of the bank to foreclose on his home, which had been purchased with the loan from the bank. Jerome argued that any mortgage contract required that both parties, that is, himself and the bank, put up a legitimate form of property for the exchange. In legal language, that is called a legitimate consideration put forward by both parties to the contract. Jerome explained that the quote-unquote money was in fact not the property of the bank, as it had been created out of nothing as soon as the loan agreement was signed. That is, the money does not come out of the bank's existing assets, as the bank is simply inventing it. And in reality, the bank is putting up nothing of its own, except for a fictional liability on paper. As the court case progressed, the president of the bank, Mr. Morgan, took the stand and admitted that the bank, in combination with the privately owned commercial company called the Federal Reserve Bank, created the entire amount of the loan in quote-unquote credit on its own books by means of a bookkeeping entry, the money and credit coming into existence when they created it. Further, Mr. Morgan admitted that no United States law or statute exists which gives him the right to do this. A lawful consideration must exist and must be tendered to support the loan agreement. The jury found that there had been no lawful consideration put forward by the bank, so the court rejected the bank's application for foreclosure, and Jerome Daley kept his home debt-free. This is exactly the situation with all American mortgages. When someone makes an application for a mortgage or any other loan, the applicant's signature is required on the application form before the loan is approved. The quote-unquote signature on that signed application makes it a valuable piece of paper which the bank can deposit in its account as a credit to the bank for the amount of the loan. The bank could just keep that application form and stay ahead by $100,000 or whatever. But they want more, much more. They want the borrower to pay them that same amount again, funding it by years of labor, and not only the amount of the supposed loan, but significant extra amount in interest as well. Why do you think that they are so keen to lend you quote unquote money, that they are even willing to lend to people with very poor credit, as there is no way that the bank can lose out on the deal no matter what happens? This is why if a company starts demanding payment of large sums of money, you start by asking them to provide the quote-unquote accounting for the deal. In other words, you are asking them to show in writing that they provide something of genuine worth as their side of the loan contract. As they invented the money as numbers in their books, with no real worth attached to these numbers, they are in deep trouble, as they cannot comply with your demand to see their accounting for the deal. Did you ever wonder how the average bank manages to make hundreds of millions of dollars profit every year? Well, you are looking right at where a large chunk of it comes from. And that's going to be the end of the segment for today, for this clip rather. The next segment will be subtitled The Bookkeeping. So there's going to be some very interesting information there. But right now, I'm going to close, and I'll show you this book. This is what it looks like. This is the book that you're able to purchase on Amazon. There you go. Now, I didn't mention what is being shown here, along with my vastly wiggling camera. So I'm going to let you know that the photo that you see here, the image that you see here is of Mahalakshmi, and the Murti that you see here, the little statue, is Saraswati, and the little Murti you see that's all in gold with little jewels on it, that is Lord Venkateshwara or Sri Balaji. And these are very beautiful deities to help us to receive blessings, to receive the 200% life experience, to receive knowledge and wisdom, and to access the proper implementation of our knowledge in a wise way, in a beautiful way. So I'm going to close out this session with the closing mantra, and the meaning of the closing mantra is to communicate my desire to bless all beings in all worlds. Thank you so much. Please remember to like this clip if you liked it, and to subscribe to my channel. I would really appreciate it. Thank you. Om, 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 Guru. Oh, excuse me. I started almost singing the opening prayers again. I guess I want to dive back in, but I don't. So let me redo this. Om, Om, Om. Loka samasta sukhino bhavantu. Loka samasta sukhino bhavantu. Loka samasta sukhino bhavantu. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Yes, peace, peace, peace. God bless you, and I'll see you soon.